Good God. Okay. Thank you all. That was a really good primer for what we are going to talk about on this panel. This is diversity in the workplace, and what methods have you all put in place, or have you've seen your employer put in place to improve workplace diversity. So we're going to do kind of a quick, if you can go ahead and do a quick introduction and just a couple sentences about how you're related to women in HPC, and then we'll start with you on this end.
So I'm Lorna Rivera, and I work for the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. I'm an external evaluator, so I actually work out of the office of the provost. Spoiler alert, I'm going to be working for Georgia Tech next month as a research faculty member, so it's very exciting. But anyways, so I do research on education, and particularly in HPC STEM programs. So.
Hi, my name's Deb Agarwal. I'm at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab in the U.S. And I do a couple of different things. So I'm part of Computing Research Association Committee on the Status of Women, which does something similar to what Women in HPC is trying to set up. We do a lot of mentoring across grad school all the way through to career opportunities and career advancement. At Lawrence Berkeley Lab, I run a committee on diversity that we've done quite a few things over the last 10 years. And I'm actually right now on sabbatical at INRIA in France, and so I've learned a little bit about what they've been trying to do there on diversity.
My name is Figen Ulgen. I work for Intel as the general manager of the high-performance computing software business. I hire and try to retain women in my organization, and I've been mentoring women in the field of data science, computer engineering, computer science, which is my background, for many years. I find that they drop out of large companies early or mid-career. So I have, other than the companies that I work for and their programs, which I'm hoping that we can talk about, I try to just mentor people within my own sphere.
I'm Alison Kennedy from the UK. So I work for the Science and Technology Facilities Council, which is kind of the equivalent of the organisation that runs the national labs. So my responsibility is for the Hartree Centre, which is an HPC big data and cognitive computing centre that works primarily with industry. I'm also the current managing director of PRACE, so perhaps some of the examples that I talk about will come from the Partnership for Advanced Computing in Europe, and some will come from my experiences with my new organisation. So I previously worked at the University of Edinburgh with Tony. Well, thank you all. So this panel is actually designed to be somewhat challenging. We're going to be asking some hard questions that maybe are somewhat controversial, because we're really looking, so Figen, to hear some of the things that you put in practice. Hopefully these questions will inspire that. So I actually am going to sit down because it's not about me. And we're going to start with the first question. And we had, we have a lot of booths. We have probably not very many women walking around the booths over there at the trade show. But let's have a theoretical situation. A female goes to the booth, she asks a question, she's dismissed with maybe a little pat on the shoulder, this is just nerdy, geeky stuff. What is the real problem here? When that...
It happened to me yesterday, so...
Really? Okay. Yeah. And so what is it, where do you think the problem is stemming from? That is happening when, and it could, maybe it's not just a woman, maybe it could be any diverse member that is not similar to what is in the booth. What is that, why is that happening? Would this happen if it was maybe a white male and something that's a little more what they believe is consistent? And how would you handle that if your booth people did that, if you had heard your booth people did that? I think we've all experienced it to a certain extent, and it's about assumptions. Because, certainly this week, I go up and speak to people and they say, what do you do? And I say, I'm the director. And people go, who? And you can see them sort of thinking, oh, here's a woman who's a director. And so I'm sure that people make these assumptions. They think if you're a woman, you're much more likely to be involved in communications or marketing or whatever. And there are lots of women involved in these, and they do a really valuable role. But you cannot assume that because somebody is a woman, they're involved in a
a side of the profession, the HPC profession, that's predominantly women. So I think it's important for technical women to go out and about and speak to people. I think the only way we can really realistically educate the community is by going around and asking these questions, and then, you know, trying to make sure that our own booth staff are sensitive.
So a little bit of, so yeah, we all know what
Yes.
happens, so, so a little bit of education with the booth staff. Don't dismiss anybody. Is it, I mean, is the answer as simple as that?
I mean, I guess I'll come to it from the person's point of view. I think you have to be comfortable with your own diversity and get over that threshold. Yes, because they're not used to it, they will give you that first reaction, and your reaction shouldn't be, I guess, mutter unspeakable phrases under your breath and walk away, but you know, just kind of maybe repeat the question in a way that actually lends you credibility. In my case, I was actually asking a detailed question about a technology demo a company, and I will not give their name, had done in partnership with us. But you know, when I approached the booth, the person actually couldn't hear me, as they explained to me later, and they assumed that I actually had no idea what they were doing. He started asking me if I knew about the company, and you know, just starting from a very basic point of view, computers 101 kind of conversation. I had to hold myself from, you know, reacting to that and just getting over the exactly, and then, you know, asking the question again, maybe in a way that shows that what I'm talking about. So I think it is, the first thing for me is accepting your own diversity and being comfortable with it, and then seeing how people respond to that. Any other thoughts?
So, well, and to crossfire, to go further on what you said, Figen, how do you know that they did that because, I mean, you said be comfortable with your own diversity. How do you know they did that because you're a woman? Maybe they do that with everybody. They want to make sure that they understand, you know, before I start talking at this level, I understand this level, so.
Excellent question.
Did you make an assumption that maybe?
That's a great question. I'm a data scientist, so I based this on roughly 25 years of data, of my own experiences, having been to technology conferences. Even as a person, when I was working in a booth, giving technology demos early in my career, when people came to me and they were asking questions, they would not ask me the harder questions they would ask my male colleagues. So I may have my own biases, that's an excellent point, but I'm kind of basing this on the data that I have accumulated.
So I just want to add one thing. Since I'm at a lab that has all the sciences, I've had the opportunity to work with biologists. And one thing I've noticed, because I clearly dress a bit like a geek, so I get a little bit less the assumption that I don't know anything about computing. But you know, so I felt like, well, you know, I'm doing fine. People are treating me equal. And it wasn't until I participated in some biology things where there were very high-profile women all over the place, and they were just treated as equals, that I realized how much differently I was being treated in those situations. Because it just felt like, well, they just have a little bit different approach to women, but it's fine. Whereas watching in biology, watching them have exactly the same approach between the men and the women to talking to their colleagues was amazing. And it's really eye-opening. If you ever get that chance, it's really amazing to watch.
Well, and again, so we kind of know we have this going on. Lorna and Tony have talked about it. I mean, what are we going to do about this booth staff or this event? Or, I mean, what kind of things specifically? I mean, we're looking for advice. What have you guys tried anything? Or, I mean, how are you approaching your booth staff at any of your event staff so that you don't have any of the unconscious bias, regardless? And don't worry, I'll let you talk.
I have a comment on that.
Go ahead.
I do. So one of the very large projects that I evaluate is called Exceed, and for those of you who don't know what it is, it's kind of like PRACE in the United States. So, and it's funded by our National Science Foundation. So Exceed has a booth every year at SC, and there are folks who staff the booth that are technical, folks that staff the booth who are from communications, what have you. We've been doing a staff climate study of the Exceed staff since 2013, I believe, and we talk about gender inequity. And so throughout that process, there's been some institutional changes, some organizational changes, not just in the way that we even talk about it, whereas before we didn't talk about it at all, but also how do you address it? And so that, I think, has played significantly into how they treat people walking up to their booth, because they've got them thinking about it. But I think it's really important to educate folks. And even when you can't educate them, then sometimes that's just where policy comes in. So with SC, Trish Damkroger, who is the head of the Diverse HPC Workforce Committee, which Tony is going to take next year, she wrote up a code of conduct for the booth staff and for SC attendees. And so for those of you who have ever had a booth at SC, there's already quite a large, what do they call it, a manual or something like that? Yeah, I'm looking at Caroline because she knows all about that. But anyways, it's quite large. But they also added a code of conduct that's about a paragraph long on their website, and it talks about things like how you treat, other people, and basically gives them a little bit of a right to deal with it when there are problems. Because that's the other thing. If you don't say that it's not okay, then when it happens, what do? How do you respond? So I think part of it is education, and the other part is policy.
I think it's a problem at lots of different levels, because if you've got a man and a woman working on a booth, the majority of people who go up will think, oh, if I've got a technical question, I'll ask the man. So, but I think that's partly justified, because quite often as organizations, we send women to man the booths, so it's administrators. Technical people come to conferences, they pay a lot of money, they want to go to the technical program, they don't want to stand on the booth. So most organizations will send a mix of admin people and technical people. EPCC as well.
We don't just send women to man our booth, though.
No, that's not what I'm saying. What I said is most organizations send some admin people, and admin people are disproportionately women.
So to play devil's advocate, should we be requiring exhibitors to be more careful about who they send?
No.
No?
No. I mean, each organization who's paying a large amount of money has to make the decision about who they send. And it's about what you want to get out of the, is it a presence so that people know your name? Are you there to sell something, in which case you probably need people who are more technically aware? Are you there to hand out bits of paper? Are you there to answer questions? So I think it's a much more complicated question and answer. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that answers your question, but it's difficult.
Well, I don't think we have an answer yet,
Yes.
but I mean, in general, we have lots of ideas, and that's the important thing, is we're sharing the ideas.
I actually love the role play idea, and I was wondering, instead of giving in addition, not instead of giving like a policy for people to, maybe dryly read and try to remember, we could have, Intel does quite a bit, so I have to go back and check if we're already doing this or not. We might be, but one idea I would suggest is to have, some role playing or just some funny situations. I mean, I think anything that we have experienced here, if we ask any one of you, there's a parody situation that you can tell us, and we can kind of replicate that in videos and tell people, make everybody even more aware how they may be approaching this,
So are you offering Intel support for a Women in HPC YouTube channel?
Actually, she just gave me a thought, because one of the things you could do is at these conferences, if you set up a small team of men and women and just did an informal survey where you sent a woman in with the question, and then you sent a man in with the question, just at different times, and had them record, or had somebody else be watching, like a social scientist, watching that interaction and the body language and things, and just tried to put up a score of, sort of gender neutrality and diversity neutrality of each of the booths. I can guarantee they will all be better next year. Because the second they're publicly shamed, generally it's amazing, right? I mean, putting up those kind of numbers immediately say, well, but we want to be better than that, than them.
Well, yeah, sure, we can reach them, but even doing that, and then providing that information back to the person at the booth and saying, hey, this is what what we observed, just letting you know that you may have some, you may have something to consider. So,
I think
we
Lorna's
do
gonna-
that to SC.
I think Lorna is the one that needs to answer. If
Yeah.
she says yes, then we're gonna have a busy
So-
week.
Oh, that's why I'm like
Yeah,
hesitant.
It'd be a lot, but
Student
it-
volunteers.
I think it'd be fun. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
student volunteers or
Yeah, so
something.
we can do some role playing, or some
Yeah.
testing and providing those results back to the people at the booth. There's definitely some awareness and role playing that companies can do. So, and I think that probably the last thing would be to have companies step up and actually recognize that this is a problem. So,
Right.
do you have a closing before we go to the next question? You do.
So it's one of those really hard things. So could we do it? Yeah. Would it be fun as a social scientist? Of course, it would be awesome. However, one of the things we learned with that climate study that I was mentioning is, and John Towns, the PI of Exceed, will be the first person to say this. They scored really low the first year, really low, and again, John said, to me, and he would say this to you. Let's not talk about it yet. Give me a chance to improve it, and then let's talk about it.
So you're right. So maybe
Yeah.
the first year you do it and it's private,
Yeah,
and then the second or third year it's public.
Mhm.
That you put up the list.
yeah. Because
But-
I mean, if you
Yeah,
really
can-
want them to
can do it
change,
across the whole,
Yeah.
the whole exhibition the first year, and then
Right.
you could say next year we're going to home in.
yeah.
Yeah, and then so and to close out, then I think the final, do you have something before I close? Go
I
ahead.
just wanted to say, it could be one of those unconscious biases. So let's not assume
Yeah.
that they're
Right.
doing this intentionally.
Oh, no, normally they're not doing it intentionally.
Yeah.
They really do think you're an admin. I'm not kidding.
Well, and, I have to say my experience was, I was talking about some pretty in-depth cooling technologies with people, and I actually didn't experience it. So I think we have a combination of, let's make sure that when we go up to the booth, we don't have that unconscious bias and only assume that one gender or the other is what is ever in our stereotype. We try to inform some of our booth staff, be a little more aware, and try to be conscious of that bias that you may have, and doing some sort of a study and seeing how widespread, see if we can provide actually concrete advice back to the booths so that they can improve. Because I do believe it's unconscious. I don't think anybody is purposely, well, if they are purposely trying to do that, they don't get to be my friend. So anyway, thank you. Next question. This year we had an all-female team in the student cluster competition. Well, yeah, good or bad? I know, this is a hot one.
Yeah.
This is a hot one.
Yeah, I think,
And we don't need to worry about Rebecca being angry with us
No,
if we don't agree
no,
with her, so
no.
let's just say that.
yeah. I mean, I have mixed feelings about this. I suspect we all have mixed feelings about this. Because I don't know who was at the award ceremony, and the guy that was introducing them.
I was, and I was very angry.
The guy who was introduced, the guy who was, yeah.
Let's save it for a coffee break, and
Right.
let's just relevant to this question.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
No,
all right.
it's totally relevant.
It is.
Okay, go
So,
ahead.
so the guy said something like, it's the team. He said something about each of the teams, and it was the team which has the most number of cuddly toys per head,
Oh,
or something like that.
That's exactly right. And
Yes.
it's completely relevant
Yes,
to
and I
this
thought,
entire
whoa,
discussion.
So I thought if he is in a plenary session, classifying women as people who bring cuddly toys to serious competitions, then there's a bit of education to be done.
Well, so on the other side, did you see the pictures they were tweeting out of their cuddly toys?
No, I
Protecting their cluster, so.
no,
I don't know
I
why-
didn't. Yeah,
We didn't tweet that, he did.
Okay,
right.
okay.
Right.
So what do we think about an all-female, the all-female team this year?
Yeah.
And this, I guess, there was one a couple of years ago at SC. So
Yeah.
what do we think about this?
Ideally, it's something we shouldn't have to comment on. Nobody went, oh, here's an all-male team,
Yeah?
They've all brought their whatever the, I don't know,
Yeah.
football
well,
jerseys or
all-female
whatever.
team, good or bad? So for what they were trying to accomplish,
Yeah.
right?
I had a little bit of trouble when you were actually talking about, gender blindness, because I feel like I don't want to care. I want to be at a state where it shouldn't matter, because there should be so many all-woman teams so they don't stand out. I think it's sad that there's only one all-woman team. And I have a 10-year-old daughter, who we tried to raise as a geek. She's super proud of that. She actually has a I Love Nerds t-shirt. And one thing we learned as, parents, and were very disappointed, was in apparently STEM competitions, there are no all-girl teams that have, that have won, or there's a abysmal number of teams. So it's kind of an extension of that, that we don't see maybe many as women. I'm conflicted, I think, as probably most of us are. I don't want to look at it as an anomaly. I want to see more all-women teams, and I don't want us to care about it, honestly.
So I think, obviously the ideal is to get to where there's an even number of women teams as there are men teams. But in the meantime, they've shown enough studies that say, having gone to an all-girls school or things, that the women are much more confident afterward. And so having these opportunities where women are together in a team, it's going to be a more supportive environment for the girls. I had dinner with them last night, and they were just fantastic, right? They were all really excited. They were disappointed about their machine crashing, but it's because they had a different environment that was more supportive, that was more, wasn't dismissive of their ideas, and allowed them to really explore and grow and put their ideas out there. And so if we don't try to have more of these all-women teams while it's a minority, we're not building up their confidence so that when they do compete with the guys and when they are on male teams, they have this memory of that they can do this. And they don't need the guys to go off and do it, and they know they can do it, and they stand up to the guys. Because if they haven't had that memory of doing that, they can, oh yeah, okay, Brad, maybe you are better, right? That stupid Mattel book that, so it's, it's the Barbie book that, that Barbie thing, that horrible thing, right? Because too many of their role models are saying that, the guy's actually better. And so giving them that experience does raise their confidence and is very worth doing.
So I have mixed feelings about it too. And for me, I think in the case of this conference, it's good to raise awareness about the issue. It's very loud and proud in a good way. And however, as a social scientist, when I look at the research, 60-40 percentage balances actually perform better. So if we were to mix it up, it would be better. And then we get back to the idea of it's just normal. It should just be normal, But it's not, which is why I think the all-women team is good for raising awareness. But then when we think about in the future what we would like to see, I would like to see 60-40 balance either way, and then we know that they would actually perform better, and then we'd be in a better place.
If the all-women team wants
Yeah.
to be an all-women team,
Then that should be fine.
then that's
Yeah.
okay.
I think so. And just like a couple people said, there's plenty of all guy teams, and
Nobody pointed that out.
right.
And until there are more teams, we haven't reached, in my mind, the utopia yet to where we can be one.
Right.
It's shocking to me, but we're not there.
Right. And I think it's also really sad that like you were saying, nobody pointed that out. So they got pointed out for their toys, but what about the guys? I'm sure they had all kinds of stuff in their booths, to keep them going or whatever. So I that bothers me a lot. And then but I'll just leave it at that.
As a follow-up
Yeah.
question, so I do want to be, I want to make sure that we're clear, and sorry, this was a little bit of a blind side here on you all, but that women in HPC, we do believe that diverse teams perform better. And we are not, this organization is not about promoting all female or all male or all dog teams, right? It's all about making sure that dogs and cats play together nicely. So I did blindside you a little bit, but Deb, you had a really interesting comment that that the all-girl team, that in the student realm, that they are building a kind of confidence that maybe they don't get on a diverse team. So in light of those two comments, one, that we do believe diverse teams perform better, and that's really interesting comment on women on the male teams are not building that confidence, which could be probably what's coming out of your research contributing to the issue of women staying in these careers. Does anybody have any follow-up comments?
So I want to kind of amplify that, because our societal teaching is that women should defer to men, right? There's a societal aspect to that everybody hears, throughout their life. And so giving them that opportunity, if they haven't done it themselves, right? I mean, I used to think, why in heaven's name would I want to work with a bunch of women? I'm doing just fine against the guys, but I have an attitude of when somebody dismisses me, I make sure they regret it horribly. And it's just been what I've done all my life, So for me, it was like, well, shit, it's way more fun to force the guys into acknowledging me than to try to, bring all the other women up. I mean, they're on their own, right? But then I started to work with just amazing women who were just convinced that they didn't have the skills when they were so much better than the guys I knew. And I'm like, how did that happen? And then you look at how much they've been just subtly beat down, piece by piece. That's, that implicit bias and things. And so giving them that opportunity where the implicit bias was just not there and having them have that experience is really affirming.
Okay. You guys have a comment?
This is maybe not a directly relevant comment, but I have 2 daughters and a son. So one of my son's honours project, my son is really, really lazy and graduated 2 years ago. So as his honours project, they had to get themselves in groups of 5. So he and his friend said, nobody wants to work with the girls. So we went to the girls and we asked to be on their team because they're really well organised. They tell us what to do, and it's a really good team to be in because they'll get us organised. So I don't need to worry about getting a good mark. So I thought, does that reflect on the sorts of values that I've tried to teach? That working with girls is good, or is that a bad thing if you're working with women because you think that they'll be better or more prepared to work with you, and you won't have team conflicts? So I don't know. But yeah, I think it can be put over as a positive thing, and I think people who worked on mixed teams realise that they are a good thing.
Yeah, and should we be talking about? I'm sorry.
No,
Sorry.
I'm just being.
Should we be talking about the fact that we have this many all-girl teams and this many all-male teams, and we have this many teams that are mixed? Is that maybe a better way that we should be talking about this at the student cluster competition?
Maybe internally, when it comes to tracking progress and success, I think those things should be measured. Whether or not they're highlighted or shared with the community, I don't think so. I don't think it should be like that. Oh, there's the girl team, there's the boy team. Like, right. I think that's the problem. But internally, yeah, I think if we're going to get anywhere, we need to measure how we're getting there, when we're getting there, why we're getting there, that kind of thing. So.
But yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be an issue because there was also sort of a feeling of oh, here's an African team, haven't they done really well? Coming to Europe and being African. Now, that's not relevant at all to the competition. So I think it was, the problem was the competition focused on the diversity and not on the skills and achievement. It focused on diversity in a bad way and not on the skills and achievements of the
Isn't
teams.
it about what they have brought together, and we should be saying the vendors, equipment that they have used and been graciously donated. Isn't that what we should be talking about?
I think the only thing I wanted to say is I heard you mention, for example, women coming from all women colleges, and I've noticed there's a definite difference. My friends who went to Wellesley, they are somehow more confident. I feel like I had to work towards that confidence, whereas they emerged from those schools being more confident. So, I mean, maybe all women competitions, if we wanted to promote something like that, that could be something to consider.
Okay. Okay. Our last question. We're going to talk a little bit about quotas. And we kind of have gotten away from advice for businesses. Sorry about that with these questions. This is what happens when you do it the afternoon before. So we were looking at this conference specifically, the steering committees and the
we're looking at the committee. We're looking at the pictures of the committee environment. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah, we have all the big pictures and then all the little pictures of people and the number of men and women on these who are in decision-making places. Michaela left here. There were no women really in any decision-making capacities on any of that, but there still is a certain percentage of women that are at this conference. So And we probably have some similar situations in your organizations where you have a certain number of women in these roles, but the management team maybe doesn't reflect that. What are we going to do about that?
I've got a great recent example. PRACE has a scientific steering committee, so it's about 20 scientists, high-profile scientists drawn from across Europe. So a third of them come up for, it must be more than 20, but it's a fairly significant number. A third of them come up for replacement every they do a 3-year term. And at the moment, there's only one woman on the committee, and she's due to retire. So we had a discussion with the group and said, look, we'd really like you to focus more on gender and diversity. And to be fair to them, they were really, really responsive. So they came up with a plan that, each person would ask around, they would nominate 10 possible people to join the panel. And out of these 10 people, 5 would be women and 5 would be men. And they then look at the group as a whole. So we now have a new panel, so that the rule now is that at least a third of the panel is women, at least a third of the panel is men, and the remaining third can be anyone at all. So the new composition had to be presented to the council yesterday, and the guy who presented it said, look, when we first started doing this, we thought we'd have to compromise on quality, but when we looked at it, we realized there are so many really great women scientists out there that we hadn't considered because we were looking at a really narrow pool. It was, people nominating 3 people they knew. So they said, we think we've got a really strong, really good pool of people now, better than it was before, and we have a gender balance. And I thought that was a nice way of doing it, and it's nice to have the committee itself validating the approach that they adopted. And I think, now that we have a balance, I think hopefully we will continue to have a balance.
So you guys did a quota system.
We did a quota system.
And it worked.
It worked. And, the group initially thought, whoa, this is a bit difficult. How will we do this? But by the end of the process, they were totally convinced that it was the right thing to do, and they'd ended up with a stronger group by having an inclusive group.
Okay.
So Intel is doing an enormous amount of work in the field of just increasing diversity. I'm actually super impressed. I worked in a couple of companies, obviously, before joining Intel. I don't think I will do justice, so please go to diversity.intel.com. But they are doing a lot to recruit women, and then once they recruit them, they start with the pipeline. They have committed $300 million to in scholarships to provide to, I guess, not just to women, but all underrepresented minority groups. They definitely have a goal of hiring or reaching an equal representation with their pipeline. So if there are 26% women in computer science, they want to have 26% women in their employee base. And once you're in, they actually have great retention programs. There are a ton of networking opportunities. There is a ton of training about actually unconscious biases, micro inequalities, etc. So they make everyone very aware of what they might be doing on a daily basis. They look at the diversity in their supply chain, which I find really amazing. They invest in women-owned startups. There's a special, I think, $100 million they dedicated to, fund women entrepreneurs. So my mind is blown away with how much they have put into corporate programs. So. I would really encourage you to look into what Intel is doing and, as a corporation, probably try to replicate, or as an outsider to, just apply to Intel. Honestly, this is not a plug for hiring, but I'm personally very impressed, and I'd like to encourage you to notice what they are doing.
To get some ideas that you could maybe employ in your organization.
So I think on a slightly smaller scale, because I've been trying to focus on this for the last 10, 15 years. And I think what I found in our organization, the best way and the most effective way is to really work hard at having advocates at a senior level that can go to the council and make these arguments that, you know, at least put them in the candidate pool, and sort of, you know, turning around the thinking enough of somebody senior enough that they're going to pay attention, and what they say matters, and where those committees and all those groups are going to say, oh, we need to do this, and we need to do it seriously, and not just as a token, not just as something else. And the second they do, you see those kind of results where it just changes. I mean, we had a recent lab director, which I can fault him for many things, but in his reign, I mean, we moved to 3 associate lab directors that were women across our lab, right? It completely changes things. NERSC itself has moved to 30% women in senior and middle management positions, right? And it's by having had some, you know, enough people in senior management who were saying, this really matters, we've got to pay attention, we've got to consciously be looking at how we remove the biases, how we find the women that are really solid and should be in positions and just aren't at the moment.
So kind of taking that next step to actually, you know, not only have a quota, but help search them, which comes back to the research that you and Tony were talking about a little earlier, that that some of the people in the underrepresented groups just aren't even aware of opportunities.
Right. And I would say, if you're going to do a quota, do it right. You know, like Alison was saying, they went in, they looked at their recruitment practices, and they redid those, revamped those up. So I think that's one way to do it, and that was enough for their group, which is wonderful. That doesn't take that much work compared to some other things. But sometimes it's not enough, right? So some of the work that Tony and I have presented previously involves student selection practices. So they had a quota for this summer school that Tony and I were involved in. And the reviewers of those applications rated the women significantly lower than the men consistently year after year after year. So Tony and I wondered, I wonder if they are actually smarter. We knew they weren't, but we were like, well, let's see if we can get some data on this. Wrote an actual quiz and measured if there were any gender differences. There were none. There were none. Not only that, but the women published twice as much as the men did, and they cited that in their application forms. So clearly there was something going on there. And even though the women we demonstrated that they were just as smart and capable, and in some ways more capable in this particular pool, the reviewers still rated them low, and I think part of that had to do with the quota, and part of that had to do with the application process. So if they would have taken the time, like Alison's group did, to kind of think critically about how they were getting these students and how they were reviewing them, and then I think they would have fixed that problem. Thankfully, we've gotten through that process enough, and we've done enough research with that group that process has improved. But that's one case where it was like that for years, and they just assumed, well, the women just aren't as smart, you know, and we just have to meet this quota, unfortunately. But, you know, that obviously has changed, so it's good.
So I guess I just want to say I'm not advocating quotas.
Okay.
In California, we're really not even allowed to talk about quotas. It's more just explicit, intentional effort to get a diverse representation and to make sure that there's a diverse set of candidates where biases in the selection process of reading resumes and things like that are as removed as possible. Because once you do that, the candidates will rise to the top, you know, is what I find. I mean, women are going to underrepresent themselves in their resume typically. I mean, I see that all the time. Right? You know, people say, oh, we'll put your major publications. And the guy puts, you know, things he presented in workshops and, you know, the technical report he wrote for his school, right? And the woman puts in the 5 journal articles she wrote, you know, or something. And it's just, women are going to have a very different way of representing themselves that won't review necessarily as well, even though it's better quality work. Right? I mean, there's a lot of studies that even just say removing the names from the resumes, women will get a more fair evaluation. It's sad, but it's true. So changing those committees to recognize that they need to seriously think about how different people represent themselves and how to evaluate those resumes in a fair way is really critical. I mean, I think, I do see women don't put as glowing of remarks. I mean, if a woman knows Python to where she would, she could write up a code in a day and not look in a single book, she says, well, familiar with Python. And the guy who could, with 3 textbooks and a week, write that same program is going to say expert in Python, right? I mean, there's crazy things like that are just obviously different when you look at the resumes.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of bias in your comment there that, the guy is going to do that and the woman's going to do that, which
On average,
on
I
average,
find it true.
So do we, I mean, these are all kind of early career people that are maybe trying to move into positions that, of different positions and growth positions. So is there really kind of an education that we need, regardless of gender, of race, about how best to represent yourself?
We do resume review workshops as part of our mentoring workshop.
Okay.
And we find it really valuable because if you give senior women the chance to look at the resume and really talk to the person and sort of talk through what they've actually done versus how it presents on the resume, they can generally give them great advice to really pump up how good they look. And so, thinking about doing something like that at some of these conferences as well is a really worthwhile thing, I think. Even the senior women that we did that with swore by it and said, oh my God, that was amazing. And I was like, really? Senior women needed their resume reviewed? And they were begging for it.
I think at the beginning, Tony, maybe, I don't know if it was you, you kind of said, this organization is to, maybe help women or promote women in their careers, not like we're not aiming at the little ones. And I was thinking some of these things that we're talking about, for example, underrepresenting your capabilities, not taking risks enough, etc., they actually are formed very early on in your childhood. So somebody was carrying a mug the other day, and I think it said the slogan like, do something that scares you every day, or, have you done anything that scared you recently? Honestly, it's about kind of developing this sense that you don't have to be 110% proficient to be able to do something, kind of accepting that, oh, okay, 60%, I know somehow how to do this, and like just giving it a try, etc. I think these are qualities you develop very early on, and I worry that sometimes we're not, encouraging little girls, etc., to develop those qualities. So, I mean, I guess I would love to pay a little bit more attention to development early on, and I'm sure there are many organizations who do that, so I'm not bringing this up as a deficiency here, but I guess I would like to venture over there too when we think about developing these kinds of capabilities.
So what do we do about, so we're giving more opportunity to underrepresented groups. What do we do about the feelings of the group that is already well represented? Because we do have to consider their opinion, and because they have a voice as well. Is there anything that you're doing to help give that voice to the people who maybe are feeling slighted because I don't get to be in that group? Does that make sense?
Yes.
I have one comment and I'll pass on to you. So I love that women's conferences, I used to work for Microsoft and Intel, they are actually inclusive. They actually don't call them women's conferences. I think they kind of call it diversity and inclusion conferences, and men are invited too. So it's not just, maybe it's overwhelmingly women because, the topics are aimed at, increasing some capabilities and topics that may be of interest to women. But I love seeing men in the audience too. So I think not maybe be careful about how we position and name these efforts could be one simple way of dealing with that.
Yeah, I totally agree, and that's around where I was going to go with that. And then I was also going to use an example. I won't say where the example is from, but I was on a committee, and for those of you who know, please don't chuckle and reveal what this was about. But I was on a committee, and a person put up a picture of a woman carrying a baby in a baby carrier, and she was at a conference, and they asked this committee, is this okay? And so the committee was allowed to talk about it. and there was disagreement. Some people thought that that was very much not okay, and some people thought that that was okay. And so I think that it's important, kind of like what Tony and I were saying in the beginning, it's important to allow people to talk about it, right? Because if you're a member of the majority group and you also happen to not agree or are not sympathetic with the cause, you need to, as a member of someone who's trying to persuade, as a member of the group that's trying to persuade that majority group, you really need to engage them in that conversation and get them to come around, because at the end of the day, it's for everyone's benefit, right? So I would first just get people to talk about it and just understand where they are, what's their baseline, and then move on from there, and then start with education and let them know, not just, well, we need to do this because it's good, but we need to do this because it's better for you. You know what I mean? Like, your bottom line's going to increase, you know, all these things having to do with productivity and innovation relating to diverse groups. So I would start there.
So just on that one, I mean, it seems like one of the big things is when you do things like, ask conferences to have childcare and things like that, you change that conversation a bit, because there's more guys that also say, oh, great, I'm going to bring my kid, and now, and now you've got guys and women walking around with a baby carriage and things, and it becomes just more neutral. And so some of these things where it's really good for the women and it's going to help support them, it's really good for the guys too, and they'll take advantage of it. And so you can get this neutral discussion about, hey, we've got to support people, our young professionals who have families, period.
Exactly.
And it, so I guess a lot of my focus at the lab has been on programs that might disproportionately help women, but are going to help the guys, because it does allow that it just looks normal, because it's guys and women doing it. And I see it in the earth sciences all the time too. Like the earth science conference I go to, I've seen just as many guys who have brought their baby as women who've brought their baby. And it is a more even distribution of women and men at those conferences in the first place.
Very briefly, my experiences in my new job, so we've just been through things like review of who's being put forward for promotion and annual performance reviews. So this is done in a big group because it's right across a lot of departments. So I think about 20 people there, I'm the only woman. Everybody else is a middle-aged white man. And at the end of the process where everyone had nominated, I said, I'd like us to go back and check how many women and how many minorities are in the groups. And they all rolled their eyes and went, oh, we just only want to select the best people. Yeah. So we went through it's important to review this, to understand, because women don't always put themselves forward or whatever. So I think, but that was the first time, as far as I could see, that anybody had ever put the idea in their heads. So I think those of us who have the opportunity to try and influence things like that have to speak up. And I think it's only gradually that we're going to be able to change views and get people to think about statistics and review what they do.
Anybody in the audience have any final questions before you finish up?
Actually, on that point, I do want to mention something that I'm really intrigued to see how it works. What INRIA has just done, their committee on women has actually asked, they've added an observer to the committees, the promotion committees, that's just watching for bias and pointing it out to help remove the bias from the process. And so they're experimenting with that. I'm really curious to see how that goes. But it seems like a really interesting experiment, is just having someone who's there watching for bias. Because most of the women in these environments aren't educated also, that they need to help watch out for this. I mean, I think I got here on my best efforts. I mean, other people will too. I don't need to think about it, right? And my collaborator, I just keep working with her to go, you should care about this. You should care about it. And this year she was on, she actually joined the senior promotion committee specifically because she wanted to see more women. She was like, yeah, I got to watch for this, So even helping educate the other women that this is something they should pay attention to, is worth doing. It isn't just innately that we all know that we've got to help each other. We think, we had it hard. We should make them have it hard as well, so that they think about it. And there's still people who are still thinking that way, right? I mean, in this room, I'm sure you're not, because you're here. But thinking about how you educate other women in your environment too, to help support other women, is worth doing. It isn't just the guys who need educating.
Okay. Okay.
I'd like to address the point that Lorna brought up, which was, is it okay to have babies at a conference? Particularly, is it okay for somebody, male or female, to walk around the show floor with a baby in a sling? I'm not talking about little silly tots who's in childcare. I'm talking about a 6-month-old baby who really needs to be with mum or dad. Is that an okay thing to do? Is it okay for them to sit at the back and talk? We've had this discussion now. I'd like to know what other people think.
Do you want me to come?
Oh, I know your opinion.
Yeah, no, that's all like.
Does anybody have, yeah.
I think resoundingly yes, and I'm seeing it more and more.
I mean, I think it depends on the baby and the parent, and if your child is comfortable being in a crowd of people, I honestly would just worry about exposing my child to all the germs. I worry about myself and get emergency twice a day, to protect myself from all the germs, etc. So I would just think of it as practically, is it okay for the child to be here? Or if you're in a conference, just like in a movie theater, if your child starts screaming, you don't feel comfortable, being there because you feel like you're disturbing other people. I think I wouldn't separate conferences from other public places per se,
Yeah, I think I would agree with that I wouldn't want to go to a conference and carry around a 6-month-old baby, because you're not going to get the most out of the conference if you're there for the technical programs. But, I think if you're comfortable with it, if it doesn't, if you're not interrupting the speaker or the people around about you by having a crying baby, I think it's fine. I suspect that sort of 5, 6, 7-year-olds running around an exhibition floor are far more problematic, tripping over wires, but that's not the question you asked.
I guess I still want to give, I have 2 women that work for me that are both, sort of my deputies on projects. And I go off to sabbatical in France and things. I need that they can go represent our projects and be, prime people in there. And if the attitude at conferences is they can't bring their baby, then they can't go represent me. And their whole career is hampered. My ability to make them my deputy is hampered. We're completely changing the conversation when we do that. And so that's why I said resoundingly yes. Now, of course, yes, if the baby's screaming, you walk out of the room, but guy or woman who's carrying the baby. But reality is, if we don't make it okay for them to just need to bring that baby around, then we're also really hampering women's careers, because it should be that they can have a very fulfilling career, have kids, take care of their kids, and have them be part of their lives throughout that, throughout their career, and be able to do breastfeeding, do all the other things they've got to do, and attend conferences if that's what they, if they don't want to take a break from work and want to keep their career going, then we need to make it okay for them to do that. I really feel strongly about it.
Something to add to that. So it's also about how your institution supports your participation in a conference like that. So my husband also works, and we have to always carefully orchestrate our travel schedules so we're not simultaneously traveling. But I learned about one thing that Intel has. They pay for childcare. So next time, and I just found out about this, to tell you the truth, because I was complaining about this juggling the travel calendars. And if I have to, go to a conference and take my child with me, and hire a babysitter in that locale, Intel will pay for it. So I think that's really important for organizations. For a single parent to be traveling and not have anybody to leave their child with, there has to be something that the organization that you work for does to help you, and that way you can travel and have a career despite having child and no
And
care.
have children.
And have children.
Okay, well, thank you all. I really appreciate it. Very good panel. We're here all day.
Thank you.